The cabin hummed with that familiar pre-flight energy. Passengers settled into their seats, stowing bags and adjusting air vents. First class gleamed under soft lighting, cream leather, polished wood accents, the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the galley. Daniel Okafor sat in 3A window seat. His royal blue blazer was pressed, his leather portfolio rested on his lap. He'd flown this route dozens of times. Today should be routine. The flight attendant moved down the aisle with a practiced smile. She offered champagne to 1B, sparkling water to 2C. Her voice was warm, accommodating. Then she reached Daniel's row. Her smile vanished. She looked at him, then past him as if he were invisible. Daniel waited. She served the passenger across the aisle without a word. He cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me, could I get some water, please?" She turned, her expression cold. "I'll get to you." But she didn't. She moved to the next row, her warmth returning instantly. The businessman in 2A smirked, glancing back at Daniel. A woman in 4B frowned but said nothing. Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd seen this script before. Then the intercom crackled. The captain's voice, tense, urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an unscheduled situation. Please remain seated." The cabin fell silent. Something was wrong. "Hey, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe respect should be universal, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and truth." Daniel Okafor wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention. He earned it quietly. At 38, he'd built a reputation as one of the Midwest's most sought-after architects. His designs were modern, elegant, functional. City halls, museums, transit hubs, buildings that served people. He traveled constantly for work. First class wasn't a luxury for him. It was necessity. Long flights meant design reviews, client calls, sketches on his tablet. He needed space to think. This morning he'd closed a deal in Chicago. A civic center project, his biggest yet. He'd celebrated with his team over breakfast, then headed to the airport. His daughter had texted him, "Safe flight, Dad, love you." He'd replied with a heart emoji. Now sitting in 3A, he felt that familiar weight. The one that came when people looked at him and saw something other than what he was. Not an architect. Not a professional. Just skin color. Just assumptions. Jessica, the flight attendant, moved through the cabin with mechanical efficiency. She was in her early 30s, blonde, her uniform immaculate. She'd been with the airline for 6 years. She knew the rules, the protocols, the subtle hierarchies of service. But Daniel had noticed the shift in her eyes. The moment she'd seen him, something had closed off. He'd become a problem to manage rather than a passenger to serve. The cabin filled with the usual sounds, overhead bins clicking shut, phones silenced, seatbelts fastened. Around him, other passengers relaxed into their routines. No one seemed to notice the coldness directed at him, except the businessman in 2A. He'd noticed, and he was enjoying it. Jessica returned with beverages on a tray. She handed the businessman his scotch with a bright smile. "Anything else for you, sir?" "I'm perfect, thank you." He leaned back, satisfied. She turned to the woman in 3C. "Your tea, ma'am." Daniel waited. Jessica moved past him toward the galley. "Excuse me." His voice was calm, measured. "I asked for water earlier." Jessica stopped. She turned slowly, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. "Did you?" "Yes, about 10 minutes ago." She glanced at her colleague near the galley, then back at Daniel. "I don't recall that. But I'm happy to help. Can I see your boarding pass?" The cabin's energy shifted. Nearby passengers looked up. Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. "My boarding pass?" "Just to confirm your seat assignment." Her tone was professional, but the subtext was clear. He pulled out his phone, opened the airline app, and showed her the digital pass. "Seat 3A, first class, paid in full." Jessica studied it longer than necessary. "Interesting. This seems fine, but there was an issue with upgrades today. Are you sure you didn't book economy?" The businessman snorted softly. Another passenger across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. Daniel's voice remained even. "I'm sure. I always book this seat on this route." Jessica's smile was thin. "Well, mistakes happen. I'll bring you water, but if there's been a ticketing error, we'll need to sort it out before takeoff." She walked away. No water, no apology. Just the lingering suggestion that he'd somehow cheated his way into first class. The businessman turned in his seat. "Busy day for the crew, I guess." His tone dripped with amusement. Daniel said nothing. He stared out the window, his reflection calm. But inside, the familiar anger simmered, controlled, focused, waiting. The city below stretched endlessly. Grey buildings, glinting rivers, roads threading through concrete. Daniel's reflection stared back at him in the window. A ghost layered over the world outside. His phone buzzed. His daughter again. "Tell me when you land." He couldn't respond yet. His hands felt too tight. Around him, the cabin continued its pre-flight rhythm. Passengers chatted, laughed, scrolled. No one said anything. No one intervened. They'd watched Jessica question his ticket, his right to be there, and they'd turned away except for the businessman who'd turned toward it. Daniel's father used to say, "Anger is fire. Control it or it controls you." He'd watched his dad endure insults at work, slurs in grocery stores, assumptions everywhere. And his father had always responded the same way, with silence and dignity. But silence, Daniel had learned, could also be complicity. He thought about the Civic Center project, the one he'd just signed. His design would serve thousands of people. It would stand for decades. He'd earned his success through relentless work, sleepless nights, presentations to skeptical boards. And still, someone like Jessica saw him and thought, "He doesn't belong." His fingers tightened around the armrest. Not today. Today something had to change. He opened his email app and began typing. Daniel's father had worked as a janitor for 30 years. Marcus Okafor had arrived in America with nothing but a high school diploma and a promise to his wife. Their children would have better. Daniel remembered watching his dad come home in the evenings, exhausted, his uniform smelling of disinfectant, his hands rough from labor. But Marcus never complained. He'd sit with Daniel at the kitchen table, helping with homework, asking about school. "Education is your ticket," he'd say. "Work is your proof." Daniel had taken that to heart. He'd studied architecture at state school, worked 2 jobs to pay tuition, graduated top of his class. His first internship was unpaid. His second paid barely enough for rent. But he kept building. His skills, his portfolio, his reputation. By 30, he'd launched his own firm. By 35, he'd won his first major municipal contract. The Civic Center in Chicago was his crowning achievement, a building that would serve the community for generations. His father had cried when Daniel showed him the renderings. "You did it," Marcus had whispered. "You earned your place," but earning and being recognized were different things. Daniel thought about the countless flights where he'd been questioned, overlooked, or treated like an imposter. The gate agents who'd pulled him aside for random checks. The passengers who'd looked surprised when he sat in first class. The subtle messages, "You don't belong here." His father's lessons had carried him far. But today, dignity demanded more than silence. He finished the email. It was addressed to the airline's corporate office. A formal complaint, detailed and calm. He attached his ticket, his frequent flyer number, and a screenshot of Jessica's name tag. Then he hesitated. There was one more person who needed to see this. Someone whose name he'd heard but never met. The airline's founder and CEO. A man with a reputation for integrity. Daniel found the public contact email and forwarded everything. He hit send. 30 seconds later, the cabin door opened again. The man who entered wasn't dressed like cabin crew. He wore a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. His presence commanded immediate attention. The flight attendants near the galley straightened, their casual chatter dying mid-sentence. Jessica froze. The man moved through first class with measured steps, his eyes scanning the cabin. He was tall, mid-60s, with silver hair and the kind of calm authority that didn't need announcement. Daniel's breath caught. The man was Marcus Okafor. His father, the CEO of the airline. They'd kept their relationship private by design. Daniel had built his career on his own name, his own work. He'd never wanted the shadow of his father's success, and Marcus had respected that, staying out of his son's professional life. But today their worlds had collided at 30,000 feet. Marcus's eyes swept the cabin and paused on Daniel. Recognition flickered, brief, controlled. But he said nothing. Instead, he turned to Jessica, who stood near the galley with a tray of drinks. "Good morning." His voice was calm even. "Is there a problem with service today?" Jessica's smile was instant but brittle. "No, sir. Everything's perfect." "Can I offer you champagne, water?" "I'm fine." He glanced at the passengers. Several were watching now, sensing something unusual. "Everyone being taken care of?" "Absolutely." Jessica's voice wavered slightly. Marcus's gaze returned to Daniel. Their eyes met. Daniel saw the question there, unspoken but clear. "What happened?" Daniel gave a barely perceptible nod. Marcus turned back to Jessica. "I'd like to see the passenger manifest, please." Her face drained of color. "The manifest?" "Yes, now." The cabin fell silent. Passengers leaned forward. The businessman in 2A suddenly looked uncomfortable. Jessica retrieved the tablet with trembling hands. Marcus took it, scrolled through the names, then stopped. His finger hovered over one entry. "Mr. Daniel Okafor, seat 3A. He looked up slowly. "Any issues with his flight today?" Jessica opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Marcus walked over to Daniel's row. He stood in the aisle, looking down at his son, the architect, the passenger, the man who'd been treated like he didn't belong. "Mr. Okafor," Marcus said carefully. "Has your experience been satisfactory?" Daniel met his father's eyes. The cabin held its breath. Before Daniel could answer, Marcus turned to the intercom near the galley. He pressed the button. His voice filled the plane, calm, final, unmistakable. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Marcus Okafor, CEO of this airline. Due to a serious service violation, this flight is cancelled effective immediately. All passengers will deplane and be rebooked on the next available flight with full compensation. We apologize for the inconvenience. Crew, initiate deplaning procedures now." Chaos erupted. Passengers gasped, shouted questions, grabbed phones. Jessica's knees buckled. The businessman in 2A went pale. Marcus set down the intercom and looked directly at Jessica. His expression was granite. "My office, now." Daniel sat motionless, watching the world around him unravel. His father had just cancelled an entire flight. For him. Because of what had happened, Jessica stumbled toward the exit. Other crew members whispered urgently. Passengers filed out, confused and angry. But Daniel understood. This wasn't just about one flight. It was about every time someone had questioned his right to be somewhere. Every assumption. Every microaggression. Every silent moment of complicity. His father had just drawn a line. And there was no going back. The cabin emptied in waves. Passengers filed past with luggage. Phones pressed to ears. Voices raised in complaint. Some glanced at Daniel with curiosity. Others avoided looking at him entirely. Jessica stood near the galley, her hands clasped in front of her. Her colleague, another flight attendant named Rachel, touched her shoulder gently. "It'll be okay," Rachel whispered. But her voice lacked conviction. Marcus remained near the cockpit door, speaking quietly with the captain. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were steel. When the last passenger exited, he turned back to the cabin. "Jessica, Rachel, Supervisor Chen, conference room at gate operations." 5 minutes. Jessica's breath came in short bursts. She nodded, unable to speak. Marcus walked down the aisle toward Daniel. When he reached row 3, he stopped. For a moment they were just father and son. No titles, no audience, no corporate hierarchy. "You okay?" Marcus asked softly. Daniel nodded. "I am now." "Good." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Let's finish this." They deplaned together. The jet bridge was chaos. Angry passengers demanding explanations. Gate agents scrambling to rebook flights, phones recording everything. A few people recognized Marcus and began shouting questions. He ignored them all and headed directly to the operations office. Jessica followed behind, her face pale, her hands shaking. Inside the conference room, Supervisor Chen was already pulling up security footage on a laptop. He was mid-40s, nervous, clearly aware that his job might depend on the next 10 minutes. Marcus closed the door. The soundproofed room fell silent. "Show me everything," he said. Chen queued up the footage. The screen showed the first-class cabin from multiple angles. Overhead bins, galley area, aisle view. Timestamp: 40 minutes earlier. Jessica appeared on screen, moving through the cabin with her tray. She smiled at 1B, offered champagne. She laughed with 2C, handed over sparkling water. Then she reached Daniel's row. Her smile vanished like a light switched off. Marcus leaned forward, watching intently. Daniel stood near the window, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. On screen, Jessica served passengers on both sides of Daniel, but skipped him entirely. When he asked for water, her body language changed. Stiff, defensive, dismissive. Chen fast-forwarded. The footage showed Jessica returning, questioning Daniel's boarding pass, suggesting he'd made a mistake. Her tone, her posture, her pointed glances at other passengers, it all told the same story. Marcus paused the video. "Supervisor Chen, how long has Jessica been with us?" "6 years, sir. Generally good performance reviews." "Generally?" Marcus's voice was quiet, dangerous. Chen hesitated. "There was one complaint last year. A passenger felt ignored. We addressed it through retraining." "What was the passenger's profile?" Chen swallowed. "Blackmail. Business class." The room went cold. Marcus turned to Jessica. She was crying now, mascara streaking her cheeks. "I didn't mean... I wasn't thinking. It was just a busy day." "Stop." Marcus's voice cut through her excuses. "Don't insult me with that. You made a choice. You saw my son and decided he didn't belong in first class. You questioned his ticket. You humiliated him publicly. And you did it because of the color of his skin." Jessica's sobs grew louder. Rachel tried to intervene. "Sir, Jessica's been under a lot of stress." "Stress doesn't create bias," Marcus said coldly. "It reveals it." He pulled out his phone and opened social media. Already videos were trending. Passengers had filmed the cancellation announcement, the chaos, Jessica's breakdown. The hashtag Dark Airline Accountability was climbing. One video had over 50,000 views. The caption read, "CEO cancels entire flight after flight attendant discriminates against black passenger." Marcus showed the screen to Chen. "This is what your airline looks like right now. This is what we've become." Chen's face went ashen. Marcus turned back to Jessica. "You're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your final paycheck will be mailed." Jessica collapsed into a chair, her career disintegrating in real time. But Marcus wasn't finished. The operations office buzzed with urgent phone calls. Public relations scrambled to draft statements. Gate agents dealt with furious passengers demanding upgrades, refunds, explanations. Jessica sat alone in a side office, waiting for security. Her phone vibrated endlessly. Texts from colleagues, messages from friends who'd seen the videos. She couldn't bring herself to look. She'd worked so hard to get here. 6 years of early mornings, fake smiles, jet lag, difficult passengers. She'd thought she was good at her job. Professional, competent. But the footage didn't lie. She'd treated Daniel differently. She'd questioned him, dismissed him, humiliated him. And she'd done it without thinking, which was somehow worse than doing it intentionally, because it meant the bias was so deep she didn't even recognize it. Rachel knocked softly and entered. "Jess, I'm so sorry. Jessica shook her head. Don't, you saw it too. You know what I did? You made a mistake. I made a choice. Jessica's voice cracked. I saw him and I just assumed. I didn't check his credentials. I didn't treat him like every other passenger. I checked his skin color instead. Rachel had no response. Through the window, Jessica could see Marcus speaking with Daniel. They stood close, their body language familiar in a way that made everything click into place. That's his son, she whispered. Rachel nodded. Jessica closed her eyes. She'd humiliated the CEO's son. But that wasn't why she was being fired. She was being fired because she would have done the same thing to any black passenger. The relationship just made it impossible to ignore. Security arrived. 2 officers, polite but firm. Ma'am, we need to escort you out. Jessica stood, her legs unsteady. She walked through the operations area, past colleagues who wouldn't meet her eyes, past gate agents who'd heard everything, past passengers who recognized her from the videos. The terminal felt endless. Every step was a reminder of what she'd lost. Not just her job, her identity, the person she'd thought she was. Outside, the afternoon sun was harsh and unforgiving. Jessica sat on a bench alone and finally let herself fall apart. Back in the conference room, Marcus pulled up more footage. Not just from today, but from previous flights. Chen had compiled it quickly. Anything involving Jessica and passengers of color. The pattern was undeniable. Slower service, fewer smiles, more scrutiny of tickets and requests. Nothing overt enough to trigger immediate complaints, but consistent enough to reveal a mindset. Daniel watched in silence. Marcus glanced at him. You've dealt with this your whole life. Every day, Daniel said quietly. Just usually not this blatant, Marcus nodded. He'd built this airline from nothing, a single plane, a dream of connecting people. He'd created policies, training programs, diversity initiatives. He'd thought it was enough, but policies didn't change hearts. Hand training didn't erase bias. We need to do better, Marcus said. Chen cleared his throat nervously. Sir, what do you want to implement? Marcus thought for a moment. Then he began outlining changes. Mandatory bias recognition training, not the generic kind, but programs with real accountability. Passenger advocates on every flight. Crew members specifically tasked with watching for discriminatory behavior. A direct reporting system where passengers could flag issues in real time. Zero-tolerance enforcement. First offense means termination, no exceptions. Chen typed furiously. This will be expensive. And controversial. Good, Marcus said. Change should be both. He turned to Daniel. What else? Daniel considered. Public transparency. Post the complaint numbers. Show passengers you're tracking this. Make the data visible. Marcus nodded. Done. Outside the window, the rescheduled flight was boarding. A new crew had been called in. Jessica's replacement was already running through pre-flight checks. Daniel watched them, then looked at his father. You didn't have to cancel the whole flight. Yes, Marcus said firmly, I did. Because if I'd let it continue, I would have been saying Jessica's behavior was acceptable. That business as usual could continue. That your humiliation was just an inconvenience. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You're my son, but you're also every passenger who's been treated like they don't belong. And I will not run an airline where that's tolerated. Not for one more flight. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not just gratitude, but recognition. His father had used his power not to protect family, but to enforce principle. The outcome was the same, but the intention mattered. Thank you, Daniel said simply. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. Let's go home. The gate area was packed. Passengers from the cancelled flight mixed with others waiting to board. News crews had arrived. Local stations alerted by the viral videos. Cameras tracked Marcus and Daniel as they walked through the terminal. A reporter pushed forward. Mr. Okafor, why did you cancel an entire flight over one employee? Marcus stopped. He could have ignored her, kept walking, let PR handle it. But this moment mattered, not just for damage control, for clarity. Because discrimination isn't one employee's problem, he said, it's everyone's problem. That flight attendant made a choice to treat a passenger differently based on his appearance, but dozens of other passengers watched it happen and said nothing. That complicity is just as toxic as the original act. The reporter's eyes widened. So this was about more than your son? My son is an accomplished architect who's flown first class for years. But today he was questioned, dismissed and humiliated, not because of anything he did, but because of who he is. That's unacceptable. And if I let that flight continue, I would have been saying it's acceptable. I refuse to run a company with that message, another reporter called out. What about the other passengers? They lost hours of travel time. They gained something more valuable, Marcus replied. A clear message that this airline stands for dignity and respect. Every passenger rebooked with compensation. But more importantly, they witnessed accountability in real time. Some of them were complicit in what happened to my son. They laughed. They watched. They said nothing. Maybe now they'll act differently next time. Daniel stood beside his father, listening. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who'd been profiled, dismissed or treated as less than human. A woman from the cancelled flight pushed through the crowd. She was older, white, wearing a cream blazer. Daniel recognized her from seat 4B, Mr. Okafor, she said, her voice shaking. I owe your son an apology. I saw what that attendant did. I knew it was wrong. And I said nothing. I'm ashamed. The cameras turned to her. She didn't flinch. I've spent my whole life thinking I'm not racist because I don't say slurs or hate anyone. But today I realized silence is a choice too, and I chose wrong. I'm sorry. Daniel met her eyes. Thank you for saying that. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. She walked away, but her words hung in the air. Then the businessman from 2A appeared. He looked defensive, angry. This is ridiculous. You cancelled a flight because someone didn't get their water fast enough? Marcus turned to him slowly. You found it amusing. I saw the footage. You smirked when my son was questioned. You enjoyed watching him be humiliated. The businessman's face reddened. I didn't do anything. Exactly, Marcus said. You participated through your silence, through your entertainment. You're banned from this airline. Permanently, the man sputtered. You can't. I own this airline. I absolutely can. Security will escort you out. 2 officers materialized. The businessman was led away, still protesting. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Marcus turned back to the cameras. This is what accountability looks like. Not just firing one employee, but examining the entire system that allowed this to happen. The training, the oversight, the culture. We're implementing immediate changes. Bias recognition programs, passenger advocates, public transparency on complaints. This airline will lead the industry in anti-discrimination practices. That's my promise. The reporters erupted with questions. Marcus raised a hand. No more questions. We have a flight to catch. He and Daniel walked toward the gate. Behind them, passengers whispered. Phones recorded. The moment crystallized into something bigger than one cancelled flight. The rescheduled flight boarded smoothly. The new crew was professional, warm, careful. Daniel noticed the difference immediately. Genuine smiles, equal attention to every passenger. No assumptions. Marcus had been offered the private cabin, but he declined. He sat beside Daniel in 3A and 3B, the seats they'd both occupied in different ways today. The plane lifted into the evening sky. Below, the terminal gleamed, the same terminal Daniel had designed. His work, now framed by this moment. Marcus looked out the window. Your mother would have been proud. Of how you handled today, Daniel nodded. His mother had passed 5 years ago, but her voice still echoed in family decisions. She'd taught him grace under pressure, strength without arrogance. She would have liked what you did too, Daniel said. Cancelling the flight, making it public. Forcing change. I didn't do it for publicity. Marcus's voice was quiet. I did it because it was right. And because if I'd stayed silent, I would have been no better than everyone else who watched. They sat in comfortable silence as the plane climbed. Around them, other passengers settled in. The woman from 4B sat several rows back. She'd apologized again at boarding. Daniel had accepted graciously. The flight attendant approached, a young black woman named Keisha. "Gentlemen, can I offer you anything?" "Water, please," Daniel said. She smiled warmly. "Right away, sir." When she returned, she set down 2 bottles and leaned in slightly. "I heard what happened on the earlier flight. Thank you both for not letting it slide." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for the service you provide every day." With dignity, Keisha's eyes glistened. She moved on to the next row. Daniel opened his laptop. Work emails flooded in. The Chicago project needed revisions. But he also had messages from colleagues who'd seen the news. Supportive words, shared stories, recognition that what happened today mattered beyond one flight. His daughter had texted, "Dad, I saw the videos. Are you okay?" "I'm so proud of you," he replied. "I'm fine. Be home soon. Love you." The plane leveled off. The cabin lights dimmed. Daniel glanced at his father, who'd closed his eyes, finally allowing exhaustion to show. Change was never easy, but today proved it was possible. One cancelled flight. One public stand. One refusal to accept the unacceptable. And maybe, just maybe, one less person would stay silent next time. Respect isn't earned through credentials. It's owed to every human being the moment they walk into a space. The instant we decide someone doesn't belong based on how they look, we reveal our own limitations, not theirs. Daniel didn't need his father's intervention to deserve dignity. He already had it. But sometimes justice requires a witness, someone willing to stop the world and say, "This ends now." Bias thrives in silence. It grows in the gaps where good people see wrong and turn away. It feeds on complicity, the smirks, the turned heads, the quiet relief that it's happening to someone else. But today silence broke, not because a CEO defended his son, but because a man with power chose to use it for principle over convenience. He cancelled a flight, exposed a pattern, and forced everyone watching to confront their own role in the story. The passengers who stayed quiet. The man who laughed. The woman who knew better but said nothing. They were all part of the ecosystem that allowed Jessica's bias to flourish. Change doesn't happen in policy memos or diversity training alone. It happens when one person refuses to look away. When someone cancels the flight, pauses the world and demands better. Daniel's father taught him dignity beats anger, and today proved that dignity can also demand accountability. Because the next time someone is dismissed, questioned, or humiliated based on assumptions, there will be people watching. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will remember this moment. The flight that got cancelled. The CEO who drew a line. The choice between silence and speaking up. Justice doesn't always arrive on schedule, but when it does, it changes everything. And the people watching, they're part of the story too. Every choice they make, to speak up or stay silent, shapes the world we all share. Choose courage. Choose truth. Choose to be the person who cancels the flight, because one day the passenger in that seat might be someone you love. And you'll hope someone had the strength to do what Marcus did, to stop everything and choose what's right over what's easy.